CBS News correspondent Tony Dokoupil is on the scene, and he's joining me now on the phone. Tony, set the scene for us right now.
Hi, Vlad. I'm at Woodside Pizza, directly across from the Hoboken terminal. It's a place where first responders are gathering to take a break from the action. The severely injured have been taken away, but what I can tell you about what happened earlier is there was a blue tent set up immediately outside the only access to the underground terminal, and the bus station, which is also on this site, was cleared out of buses and ambulances backed in one after another from hospitals all over the area. And the most severely injured were pulled up on gurneys, and then they were treated underneath the blue tent. The tent there, one presumes to avoid, to give the people a degree of privacy from the helicopters overhead, stabilized in the tent, and then put into these ambulances that then drove off. There were 5 or 6 people who I saw come out on gurneys this morning, and then there were dozens more coming out with scrapes or bruises, dust on their clothes, covering their eyes. These are people in the less injured category, and they were put onto a bus. Many of them also ended up at the hospital for treatment. And in terms of the actual crash itself, I talked to a New Jersey transit worker who was on the platform when the train came in. He was in the break room when he heard the first boom. He came out and he saw the train still moving. He said it went right through a coffee stand on the platform. So you got to keep in mind, this is 8:45 a.m. at a major train station at the footstep of New York City. A coffee stand is going to be a busy place. That coffee stand is demolished, and the train continued moving on the platform all the way up to where the ticket counter is around here. Again, 8:45 a.m., a ticket counter is a busy place. This transit worker told me that the injuries were significant on the platform. There were pillars down. The roof of this 100-year-old station was collapsed. So then in addition to those, to that worker, I talked to 2 people who were in the first passenger car of the train. They both told me that they were okay and that the people around them were okay. So the injuries seemed to be more on the platform than in the train. But they said it was incredibly chaotic and frightening. There was no indication based on the rate of speed that they were going that they were anywhere near stopping in the terminal. One gentleman I spoke to was on his phone taking care of some early morning emails as he was pulling into the station. He said that there was zero indication that he was about to gather his belongings and exit the train. There was no opportunity to prepare, to brace yourself. It was just boom, it goes dark, the ceiling caves in. He actually climbed out of a window, a broken window, to safety himself. But the injuries not on their car, they were outside on the platform. Third bit of information I have for you that is important. I'm sitting at this pizza place where first responders are gathering to take a break, and I've spoken to 2 Port Authority investigators who tell me that the operator of the train, the engineer, the person in the front car, survived the crash. That's an unofficial comment, but from 2 people in a position to know. Just a few moments ago, I talked to a member of the New York State police force, which is here. They also said the operator survived the crash. No word on injuries. I know you've got an interview that CBSN has been running suggesting that the operator was slumped over the control panels. So maybe he was injured, maybe not. But I can tell you that I've now got 3 strong sources telling me here on the scene that the operator survived. So that'll be important, of course, to reconstructing what might have happened here, what could have gone wrong. Additionally, I'm told that these trains, although they are short-run commuter trains, they have a dead man switch, so-called dead man switch. Typically on trains, a dead man switch is a button that the operator of the train has to hit at intervals, at specific intervals, and if he does not hit it, the train automatically shuts itself down. In this case, no dead man switch was activated, and one of the investigators I spoke to said that it would have been too late. So if there was an issue, it developed after the point at which a switch could have made a difference to slow down this train. So that's an important bit of information. Additional key bit of information, an investigator told me that these trains are equipped with a black box. So there's going to be very good information, they hope, on that black box when it's recovered. And in terms of recovery, what's happening right now in front of me, it's not an emergency situation, it's an excavation situation. So there's heavy equipment, there's people with canvas and saws, and they're the ones that are moving in and out of the underground damage area where the impact was, going through the rubble. And so you've got streams of information that you can see them pulling together. And as we learn more about what led into this crash, it sounds at this point like it's going to be a pretty good reconstruction. We're going to have answers very soon, Vlad.
Tony Dokoupil on the scene for us. Tony, stand by. I want to bring in Mark Rosenker. He's a former NTSB chairman. He joins me now also by the phone. Mark, I know that this is still very, very early in the investigation. The good news, as reported by Tony Dokoupil, is that the engineer seems to have survived. And so the question is, where does the investigation go from here? Give us a sort of step-by-step of what the NTSB is doing, as well as both the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey.
The first thing that will be done is they will, upon arriving at the scene, is begin to document the scene. After they do their documentation, whether it's by diagram, whether it's by photograph, they will then, certain people will be doing witness accounts. They're going to try to immediately grab hold of the locomotive event recorder, which is like a black box, and that information will be taken to Washington, downloaded and read, and thereby the analysis will be done to see exactly the speed that the train was operating at when it struck the safety barriers. It will also reveal if, in fact, the engineer was attempting to bring the throttle back, if he was attempting to apply brakes, or if, in fact, he was attempting to use the emergency braking system. All of those things will be brought forth, and that will be factual when, in fact, we are able to do the analysis from that. The interview, obviously, with the engineer will play a very important role. They will look at his medical records. They'll do a 72-hour history to see if, in fact, he was out partying instead of sleeping. Was he fit for operations that day? All of those things will be part of the complete record and docket. Information will also come from witnesses that were on the train and on the platform. There'll be surveillance tape, I am sure, that they will find in that train station, which will probably enable them to actually watch a moment by moment how that train arrived in the platform and then how it struck the actual safety barriers. There will be probably some kind of dash cam camera that will be on board that train as well, which could be helpful in seeing the approach. I don't know if they have a camera which is actually facing the engineer. Amtrak does have that on many of their routes on the Northeast Corridor. So they will then have what we call the parties meeting and group breakdowns. The parties to the investigation will be the Federal Railroad Administration, New Jersey Transit, the unions for both the engineer and the conductor, and this will be led by the NTSB. All of the specific working groups will then go out to begin looking at the things that they're responsible for: equipment, track, signals, human factors, survival factors. And then also we have something called our Transportation Disaster Team. They're going to be working with any of the victims and the families of the victims in order to get them through this process.
Mark, I want to ask you about the 2011 crash that happened in the very same station, New Jersey Transit, a PATH train ramming into a bumper in 2011. The NTSB released a report about that crash. They said in the report the probable cause of the accident was the failure of the engineer to control the speed of the train entering the station. Contributing to the accident was a lack of a positive train control system that would have intervened to stop the train and prevent the collision. So between 2011 and 2016, are you at all aware if any of those issues have been rectified?
Unfortunately, Vlad, and this is one that really strikes home for me because I was the chairman of the board when, in fact, we were able to successfully get the requirement for all these Class 1 railroads and commuter railroads to install positive train control by the end of 2015. It's an expensive proposition. There is no doubt about it. It's a complex proposition. But that was the law of the land, and the Congress gave the railroads 7 years. And unfortunately, the railroads slow-rolled this process. Some, in fact, have actually done it, but the vast majority of them have not, and they've actually gotten Congress to give them an extension to at least 2018, and they're working on trying to get it for 2020. Vlad, positive train control, in my judgment, would have prevented this accident from happening.
Mark, what is exactly positive train control?
It's a technology which works with track, it works with location, it works with the locomotive itself to actually understand its surroundings. And when, in fact, it is not in an appropriate place that it should be or operating at a speed that it should be, the train actually will take over and automatically stop.
So now what you're saying is the recommendation of the board when you were its chairman was to install these measures into place, and because of budgets and our legislators, there's been a significant portion of time between the report and the time that the train organizations have to implement this safety measure.
Absolutely, Vlad. I was thrilled. I was so thrilled that I took this off our most wanted list because it was registered in law in the Railroad Improvement Safety Act of 2008. And when, in fact, it said these railroads shall no later than December the 31st, 2015 have positive train control implemented, I honestly believed, and this was back in '08, I honestly believed that the railroads were going to do this because it was law. The Congress passed the law to require it, so that it went beyond recommendation. It was a congressional act that required it, and these railroads, unfortunately, just disregarded it, slow-rolled the process because they didn't want to invest that quickly, and thereby we see what we have and threatened to close down the railroads if, in fact, the Congress wouldn't give them an extension.
And that crash back in 2011 was not as serious as this one. 34 people were injured in that crash. And in the report the report states that it was the failure of the engineer to control the speed of the train. Why was he unable to control that speed?
That's a good question, and I didn't have that in front of me to be able to share the exact action in that particular report. I had left the board by then.
All right, Mark Rosenker, he is a former NTSB chairman. He's on the phone with us. Mark, stand by. Do we still have Tony Dokoupil? Tony, I want to ask you a question. You say that the engineer may have survived this crash. What are we hearing about where he's been taken?
So the reports on the scene here are that he's at the hospital, that he has survived, he's at the hospital. I don't have word on his injuries, although the interview you aired earlier with the transit worker suggests that they are significant. There are also unconfirmed reports at this time that one of the things that's being looked at as a possible cause of the accident is a heart attack, that the engineer could have had some sort of a medical condition, possibly a heart attack. That's something being looked at. But we don't have any word further, anything more than that. But it does appear at this point pretty strong reports that the engineer is going to make it out of this and be in a position to be interviewed by the authorities. So that's certainly good news in terms of reconstructing what might have happened this morning, Vlad.
All right, Tony, stand by. I want to ask Mark Rosenker another question here. Mark, I've been hearing various reports, and you just heard Tony Dokoupil saying that sources have told him that there is what's called, I guess, a dead man switch. How does that work? And various reports, I heard another engineer on another network talking about 60 seconds where if his hand is not on the throttle, that dead man switch would automatically kick in. Is that correct? Or exactly what would that dead man switch be?
And I'm not even convinced they still call it that. Today we call it an alerter. And what happens is that the engineer, in order to show that he is not passed out, not had a heart attack and thereby unconscious, they have a mechanism built into the locomotives which basically require him to touch something on that dashboard. It may not have to be the throttle. It may not be the brake. You get some tactile connection that enables the train to know that you're still fully focused on what you're supposed to be doing. If, in fact, you do not, if you don't touch this with your hand, the train is supposed to come to an emergency stop. Now, it could have been, remember that this train did stop as it approached the terminal itself, and it could have been less than a minute when they began to move this train to when it finally actually collided with the safety barriers. If that's the case, the alerter would have not been of any help.
A lot of questions still remain. Hopefully we're going to get some answers. Mark Rosenker, former NTSB chairman, thank you so much. Tony Dokoupil, CBS News correspondent,